I'm married to the daughter of immigrants. I do think that immigration can enrich this country. I do think that, immigrants, many of them are bringing a lot of to the table, but we have to be honest with ourselves that permitting 500,000 immigrants in a society like ours is much different than permitting 5 million or 50 million immigrants. And importantly, where are the immigrants coming from? What are their values? What are their economic skills? There's something.
What's their criminal record?
What's their criminal record? There's something very in sort of the modern. Again, this is a new thing because this is not Bill Clinton liberalism. This is
Right.
something that we're seeing today, where they don't even want to talk about the quality and the backgrounds and the skills of people coming into our country. Somehow it's fundamentally racist
Right.
to say, well, we don't want certain people of certain backgrounds to be in the United States of America. No, it's just common sense. I mean, let me sort of give you a very specific example, okay? So, ask yourself, should America accept 100,000 immigrants from Mexico, okay? Just in the abstract. Well, Mexico is a gigantic country with millions upon millions of people. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about people who speak English as a second language and don't have criminal backgrounds? Or are we talking about people who don't even read and write in Spanish and do have criminal backgrounds? Because those same groups of people, even though they come from the country we call Mexico,
Right.
are going to assimilate and contribute to America's society much differently. There's something in the modern liberal mind that doesn't even allow you to ask the question, who does America benefit from bringing into this country? And if the answer is we don't benefit, then why would we bring them into the country?
Well, it's also the concept of being anti-open border somehow or another became attached instead of safety. It became attached to xenophobia.
Yes.
It became attached to racism. And when you confront people and say, "Do you know that Venezuela is literally opening their prisons and instructing people to just cross into America?"
Yes.
Like, no. When you tell one of the wildest ones, I think it was you, were having a conversation with a woman where you're discussing the gangs in Aurora, Colorado that have
That
taken
was me.
up.
Yeah.
And she was like, "It's only a couple buildings."
And
What?
imagine if that's your community. It's only a couple of apartment complexes, right, with hundreds of people that have been taken over by Venezuelan gangs. I think, Joe, the right number
Is
of
zero.
apartment complexes taken over by Venezuelan gangs is 0.
It's in San Antonio, too. It's happening in San
It's
Antonio.
happening everywhere.
It's so crazy that people don't want to admit to this because if they do, it's empowering the right.
Yeah.
And they think it's going to help Donald Trump get elected. So they're turning a blind eye to dangerous criminals crossing the border
Yeah.
with no recourse, no
Yeah.
tracking. You can't do anything about
Well,
it.
you see this in some communities where, because they're small towns and because rapid migrant influx can happen very quickly, where the town population has been doubled. Okay, so you don't even have to assume people are criminals. What does it do to the local public school when all of a sudden 1,000 newcomers show up that don't even speak English? Right? What does it do to the hospital system when you now have thousands of people in a small healthcare system that are showing up to get emergency services because they don't have access otherwise to a doctor, and now the American citizens have to wait in line for 7 hours to get to see a doctor because we've overwhelmed the local hospital system? What does it do to housing prices? We've seen this in a number of communities, including those that I represent in Ohio. When you bring in thousands upon thousands of people, you cannot build enough houses quickly enough to accommodate that, so the cost of housing becomes unaffordable for American citizens. It is the craziest thing that we've seen in this country that you don't even allow people to talk about the effects of mass migration anymore.
Right.
And that's why I think it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is going to be elected president, or at least should be elected president, because he's one of the few guys who's saying, you know what, no, we're going to talk about this problem. Yes, some immigrants are good. Some immigrants are not good, and that is an obvious insight to anybody who knows human nature.
What do you think is the goal behind allowing this to take place? Now, first of all, one of the things that Kamala Harris has said was that there was a bill that could have fixed the border problem, but that Donald Trump did not want it to take place because he wanted to keep this as a political talking point.
Totally dishonest. Totally dishonest.
What was the bill?
Okay, here was the bill. What happened is, okay, let me talk about what the bill does first of all. Okay. Number one is it sets a maximum cap on the number of illegal immigrants that we can have before the border shuts down. That maximum cap is 2 million illegal aliens per year. It's like 1.85 million to be more precise. That's number one it did. Number two, it codified what's called catch and release, where a person comes into our country, they're an illegal immigrant, but they say, no, I'm not an illegal immigrant, I'm an asylum seeker. And so their claim for asylum gets adjudicated, but because there's a backlog, because we have so many, their claim isn't going to be adjudicated for 15 years. So rather than having that person wait in Mexico, we give them a work permit, and we give them legal status, and we let them come into the United States of America. That's called catch and release. Donald Trump's policy was you have to wait in Mexico. We're not going to catch you and then release you into the country for 15 years. It codified that. In other words, is that he would not be able to undo catch and release if he won the election. It would be codified into American law. Third thing it did, nothing on the border wall, nothing on an immigration system called parole, which is supposed to be a case-by-case. You grant parole to people who are fleeing tyranny, but Harris has used parole to the tune of millions upon millions, mass parole, whole categories of country have been paroled into the United States. It didn't do anything to solve that problem. So it wasn't a border security bill. It was an amnesty bill. Now, in addition to what I just said, it also gave some table scraps to Border Patrol. And that is what allows them to hinge onto that one thing and to say it's a border security bill. No. It was a mass amnesty bill. It would have made the border problem 10 times worse, and that's why they ultimately pushed it, and that's why Republicans fought against it. By the way, like 6 Democrats voted against that piece of legislation because they thought it was kind of a disaster. So it was not a bipartisan border bill. And in fact, it was much more bipartisan, the opposition to the legislation, but it has allowed Kamala Harris to go around and dishonestly claim that she cares about the southern border, even though when she came into office, they bragged about undoing all of Donald Trump's successful border policies. They did exactly that. And then we had the massive migrant invasion that we've seen over the last 3 years.
And I think it was good on you in the debate with Tim Walz when they fact-checked you. They tried to check you and say that this has always been in place. And you stepped up and said, no. This app is new, and this app was specifically used for shipping.
Yes.
And now they're using it to schedule people to illegally come into the country. Here's the question.
Sure.
Why? Why is this happening? What do you think? I mean, obviously speculation a little bit, but what do you think the motivation of allowing this to take place and the disproportionate number of people that have moved to swing states, which is also like a little suspicious?
So it depends on how many tinfoil hats do you have in this room?
I got a lot, dude. I got a wardrobe.
We can get real serious about this real quick, or pretty crazy very quickly. Look, I think what is obvious is, and I've seen this in the halls of Congress, I've seen it very explicitly. You talk about lobbying, and we obviously talked about in the context of other industries. There is a massive corporate lobby for cheap labor in the United States of America. And that is, I think, the main thing that's going on. Think about this. If you've got millions of illegal aliens, okay, let me tell you a story. In 2017, 2018, when I was in the private sector, I was at a business conference dinner, and I was seated next to the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in America. This is, I think, probably 2018. And the guy is going on and on about how much he hates Donald Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? Because again, I was sort of a Trump skeptic in 2015, and at this point, I was kind of starting to really get on the Trump train. And he said, well, the reason I hate Donald Trump, he says, is because Donald Trump's border policies have cut down the number of illegal immigrants. And because I can't pay illegal immigrants under the table anymore, I have to pay American workers, and they want much higher wages. And I was like, this guy just admitted it. I was like, holy shit, this guy just admitted it.
That's a crime.
That is like straight up monopoly man evil shit that this guy admitted to. And I was like, my wife, who's very apolitical, she was actually at the dinner with me, and she's like, come again? You just said you don't want Americans to get decent wages. Like, that is the best argument for Donald Trump's immigration policy, is that American workers are getting higher wages, and this is why this corporate CEO hates it. So whatever the industry is, you've got a lot of people who want cheap labor, and they don't want to pay American workers higher wages. That's a big part of it. I do think there's also a power dynamic to it. In particular, I think Kamala Harris and the Democrats, they want to give these millions upon millions of illegal aliens the right to vote. They want to legalize them. They want to make it easier for them to participate in our elections. And that means fundamentally the end of American democracy. Because you're talking about 25 million people here. If Kamala Harris gives 10 million of those people legal status and allows them to vote in American elections, then say 70-30 they go Democrat. Republicans will never win a national election in this country in my lifetime.
And the only way to get them on your side would be the Republicans offer the same services and maybe even be more generous in letting illegals in.
Exactly.
I mean, you would have to literally beat them at their own game. I'm going to give you a free house.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, it would, lifetime's probably overstating it, but you'd have to. It would take 30 years for the Republicans to get to a point where we could even compete with these newcomers. But again, it will have degraded the voting power of the people who have the legal right to be here.
And it would essentially turn these states blue forever. It would turn the same way they've done California.
Exactly. And we saw this. And look, I'm like a Reagan guy, right? I'm a conservative Republican. But Reagan screwed up a lot. He screwed up mental health in this country. People don't talk nearly enough about that.
The amnesty thing he really screwed up.
The amnesty thing he really screwed up.
Yeah.
And people always say, well, Ronald Reagan, when critics of Donald Trump will say, well, look at how Reagan talked about immigration. Because of what Ronald Reagan did at the 1986 amnesty, California is now effectively a permanently blue state.
Except when Arnold won.
But Arnold ran as a super moderate Republican. He was a major celebrity, right? He was at the height of his celebrity power, and he still won barely, even though California had been mismanaged. California is a one-party state because of Ronald Reagan's amnesty.
And that's the fear, is that the entire country could become one party.
The entire country becomes that. Now, it also, you may not appreciate this, but even if you don't give people the right to vote, it really distorts congressional apportionment and then the Electoral College. You know how this works?
Yes, okay. I do. But explain it to people, please.
Okay. So how many, we have 435 congressional seats. The way that you draw those congressional districts is that you try to draw them evenly based on population so that everybody has equal representation, right? One person, one vote, fundamental principle of American law. But you don't just count the American citizens. You also count the illegal aliens. And so, for example, the state of Ohio lost a congressional seat in the last census, and states that have high illegal immigrant populations picked up congressional seats. So you're actually taking away congressional representation from American citizens and giving it to illegal aliens. Even if you don't give them the right to vote, you're still destroying the voting power of American citizens.
Because it's based on population.
Because it's based on population, including illegal immigrants.
Is there a way to change it so that it's only based on legal American citizens?
Well, Donald Trump tried a proposal that Democrats went nuts over and was litigated in the courts, so we would have to try again, that would ask citizenship status during the U.S. Census. The idea being that if you ask more people their citizenship status, you get fewer people who are answering that question. I think that we should make it, and I do think this would require an act of Congress, but I think that it would be constitutional, is we should just say that illegal aliens are not counted for purposes of congressional representation.
Yeah. I mean,
Democrats would call that racist, but it's just common sense policy.
Well, especially if it's been shown that you're manipulating it by moving more people to these places, and even if they're not legal citizens and they can't vote, it still counts as congressional seats.
Correct.
That's kind of crazy.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't. The one that drives me the most crazy is this idea that somehow or another it's discriminatory to require ID to vote.
It's nuts.
That could only mean, I've tried to look at this from the most charitable position outside of it. Only makes sense if you're trying to cheat.
That's exactly right.
You need an ID for everything.
Yeah.
You need an ID to rent a car.
Well, it's basically illegal now in California.
Yes.
To ask for voter ID,
which is crazy,
which is totally insane. But my view, and I'm sure you got many listeners in the great state of California. The next time you're pulled over by a police officer, just tell them that you're on your way to vote.
I've seen that meme. Yeah.
I mean, think about this.
Yeah.
But you can't, if you can't require people to show voter ID, then I think you're inviting fraud into your system. And there's also something implicitly very racist about this, because what they say is voter ID means that black people aren't going to vote. Well, number one, if you look at polls, the same level of support for voter ID exists in the black community as in the white community. It's about 75-80% of blacks, 75-80% of whites support voter ID. But they're basically saying that black people can't get identification. When they say that voter ID is racist, they're implicitly saying black people can't get identification. I think that's an actual racist concept, concept, I actually assume that my fellow or that black citizens are my fellow Americans, and they can do the same thing that every other citizen can do, which is get identification.
You're already seeing a lot of people in the black community that have turned towards Trump because they're seeing what's going on with this immigration and how it's affecting them, and the fact that these people that are coming in that are illegal immigrants are getting so much aid that they're not getting. And they're like, this is fucking crazy. This is our community, and you're having these people come in, you're giving them food and money and shelter, and you won't do it for us, and we've been here forever, and we're Americans. This is crazy. And then there's a lot of people that, like even Michael Rappaport, because of the way things are going in the world, is saying that, and he fucking hates Trump, and he talks wild shit about Trump. Even he's saying that first of all, that's not off the table, and that now that's the only solution.
Well, I don't think we're there yet, but I don't think on the basis of the time he would have, his temperament, or his ability to build a team. You know, Trump is kind of a one-man show, and his team-building ability I don't think is enough to solve the problem either. But the punchline of that is if Kennedy can't do it, for whatever reason, if politics gets in the way, we still have to get whatever that cabal is out of power immediately. This could not be more of an emergency. We've seen through COVID how dangerous these people are, how little they care about our well-being, and we have to rally around whatever it is that addresses this problem. And, you know, as much as I'm not a believer that Trump on his own can do the job, I would far prefer him to another standard bearer of that cabal. The cabal is too dangerous. And I say this, as you know, I'm a lifelong Democrat. All right? This is my party that I'm telling you cannot be trusted with governance. But that's where we are.